Oh, sorry. So that's been our work, and we'll keep trucking, but it's pretty slow because we're still, we kind of have maybe one or two new people each time, which sometimes you have somebody who drops out and stuff. So we've had pretty consistent between 6 and maybe 8 or 10 people. So
That's
that's been our thing right now. We're trying to get the most people and do the most work. So that's the update from DC.
Right. And I would say that numbers are not as important as probably dedication and willingness to work hard. Because like I said, myself and Paul and Chris got the bill passed all by ourselves, just 3 people. So 3 people can do lots of things as long as you're willing to really, do your best and, try to be direct with what you're doing.
Yeah, and I agree. I think, there are a few very dedicated people, so I think we can do a lot with that.
Uh-oh. All right, that's better. All right.
Mary, do you have any advice from your experience? From your experience of getting it passed, what can you tell us? Any hints or what worked, what didn't?
Who am I speaking with?
This is Rocky.
Hey, Rocky. So what we did was we took the bill in its entirety, as well as sort of a lot of information on why worker ownership is important, but very succinctly and totally not political. So like no political wording or jargon or like nothing partisan. Right. So like we didn't use the S word,
Right.
we were kind of like let's just talk about like why is this important for business owners and why is this important for economic democracy and an engine of economy in our state. Like, that's it. And but we did actually target someone who was in a really perfect place, because New York, like someone was saying before that oh yeah, DC is a one-party state. Okay, New York is a one-party state. They own the place and they can do whatever they want. And most of the time, Democrats don't really cooperate with anything progressive in New York, unfortunately. Like sometimes you get things passed, like the funding of education, which is great, but that's a rarity. So basically, we went to someone in the IDC, which is what we have, which is Democrats who side with the Republicans, in order to threaten the Democrats to do what they want. And so we have, so they threaten to vote with the Republicans, or else they'll, or if you give us what we want. So we've got like a progressive in the IDC who took on the bill. I'm sorry for the noise, guys. It's New York City. So a progressive who took on the bill, and she basically championed it, and she got it passed even in the research form, which is better than nothing. So I would just say find your legislator that might work with you, someone who is in a position to kind of move things one way or the other. But it's tough in a one-party state. It's really tough. I don't know. You have to find someone who is progressive enough, but has enough of like clout to get it passed.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Well, I'll just update you guys on the last meeting that the Chicago group had last month. And a couple of the initiatives that we had been discussing, the larger one is that we had a gentleman by the name of Eric Rodriguez who started about 10 years ago his own group called the Latino Center and Center for Latino Workers. And basically that's an organization that's very involved in immigrant, undocumented immigrant rights, protecting them, and also their workers' rights. That group has been very influential in being able to pass a lot of worker protection as it relates to wage theft prevention and workers' rights within the state of Illinois in the past couple of years. His group has been looking over the last few months about just going from how to protect the workers to empowering them to starting their own worker cooperatives. They know close to nothing about that area with the exception of Eric and a few individuals. So he actually came to our meeting last month to discuss that initiative that his group is trying to get involved in. And he reached out to us because he figured we can be a pretty good resource for helping them in that battle. So, well, we had a pretty productive meeting and exchanged calendars of trying to move forward with coming up with a game plan for educating those members of his group and seeing what we can do in the neighborhoods in Chicago to try and push that legislation forward. We do have some, I wouldn't say heavy hitters within the city government, but a couple of aldermen, one who's pretty well known that actually forced our current mayor into a runoff election last time, who's pretty behind the idea of economic equality for a lot of the disenfranchised in the city, Chuy Garcia. So we do have some connections there where, you know, kind of what you were talking about, Kevin, in DC. It's going to be hard at the state level for us, just because the state as a whole kind of resents everything that comes out of Chicago, but they know they have to listen to us because we're pretty much the economy for them. So we kind of figure if we can really transform Chicago's landscape as it relates to economic equality, especially through worker cooperative initiatives, we can kind of push the agenda statewide. We do have some connections with some friendly state legislators, one in particular, Will Guzzardi, that I know indirectly. He's a pretty strong progressive young gentleman. I know he would be all for what we're talking about. So we'll definitely be looking forward to discussing this with him and trying to push this legislation at the state level. We also are going to, in our next meeting upcoming this Sunday, going to have a guest speaker by the name of Dr. Schweikert. I think his first name is Dan, but he's a professor at Loyola University, a philosophy professor. He's been very big in his own right in terms of the philosophy behind transforming democracy into the economic realm. He's written several books. One of them we read a couple months ago that talks about the idea of moving the economy as a whole, nationwide and globally, towards a worker cooperative base. So he's coming Sunday to kind of give a discussion on his thought processes, his theories, and hold a Q&A session. And Mary, as we talked about the last meeting, we made some more progress on one of our members who had created an app, kind of like a Craigslist, like we said, / dating site, if you will, for folks looking to get connected with forming their own ideas of worker cooperatives and how to connect with other members who would be thinking about joining worker cooperatives in the same field. So that's what we've been working on the past couple months, and we're gonna get into that a little bit further at Sunday's meeting.
That's cool. Congratulations on getting Schweikert.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Did you guys get a chance? Are you gonna tape it?
Oh yeah, most certainly. I think he's agreed that would be fine. Definitely, if he's okay with that, we can record it. We'll definitely make sure to get that out to you guys.
Yes, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, appreciate it. And if anybody has the opportunity to make B-roll or write something about what your groups are doing, the email also stated that we are always actively asking for that type of stuff. So any type of programs or things that you're doing, that would be really fun to have. Any other updates?
George here in San Diego.
Hey, George.
Yeah, update on what we're doing. As I said, we already have an event set up, our monthly event on August 27th on starting worker-directed enterprises. As far as our group, we are working on our own media co-op, Arete Media Productions, and we're only about a month or two old. And we are connected with the Pasadena Media. It's kind of a public broadcaster. So actually I'm going up tomorrow and they have a studio there. And I'll be actually discussing this new website you put up and doing the legislation promotion. So what we do is we do tape for the public broadcasts, live stream, and or cable TV. So what we plan on doing is making this an ongoing series of Democracy at Work productions to give the public an update on the progress of the organization, but also things like legislation, co-op education, and we will be taping all these and then packaging them for educational, public educational purposes.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
Very good.
We could always use more of that.
Oh yeah, well, the power of broadcast, we're finding that's the key. By the way, in the LA area, Los Angeles area, we just had an event meeting where we interviewed people like, you probably know who Greg Palast is. He's an investigative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we met him, and Jimmy Dore, who's the political comedian. So it was a huge event in the LA area, and we actually interviewed them, and they were, very interested in what's going on here. Obviously from a progressive point of view, but we're tying in a lot of their issues on electoral reform with what we're doing also, because there's kind of a whole universe of progressive political policies people are working on up there. We interviewed the famous actor Ed Asner, who's very actively, very active in progressive work, and people like that are very interested in this. So we're trying to do our best to get it broadcast, especially in the San Diego County area, because there's a huge amount of interest here. And of course, we have obviously a huge audience base here. So you guys are on the East Coast in New York. We're on the left coast here. So we're bridging the two.
Yeah.
Across the Great Divide, and hopefully we can get everything consolidated.
Sounds cool. And I do want to make a call out to anyone who knows anybody who might actually be an expert in other areas of drafting legislation, because after we do the worker ownership, we want to also have the website be like ALEC. So we kind of need to draft legislation on what is a free and fair election and how is that structured legally, because I don't really see anybody doing anything on that, and that's crazy.
Right, there is a lady who's working on what's called free and equal election, and there was at Politicon here, it was kind of a political convention for different groups, and we interviewed them, and they were also very interested in that. So that would actually tie into this whole issue of legislation and voting, because it's all an institutional issue, of course, and of course the economic policies of what we're doing with Democracy at Work tie in. So it's political, economic, it's kind of the whole bag of worms.
Awesome. So yeah, if you have her contact information, would you mind sending it to me?
Sure.
Cool. Because it would be great to sort of I don't know, I feel like the left is really splintered and we don't know what to do, and to make everything we're doing about Donald Trump is really crazy, because he's a symptom of a disease, not the disease itself. So like, I figured like if we can really concentrate our efforts on going after the disease, we'll be much healthier in the long run, you know?
And it's nice to be actually doing something instead of, it's important to march and rally and all that sort of organizing, but it's also important to have something tangible to be able to change in, some parlance, the material conditions of people's lives. And so if you can do that, not only are you're being an activist, but you're being an activist with something that you can really show for it. I think that it's a great way to rally around too, and say something like, this is what we want, and these are the people who are getting it done. So I think that could be, and I mean, you can, I'm not sure how particularized my knowledge is of legislation. I mean, I just graduate law school, so I have a familiarity with the law generally, but
you know more than me. That's
so I mean, I'm obviously more than willing to, be dangerous with this, what I know, I guess. So
exactly.
You could
I think you just found your emphasis there, Kevin.
Yeah. No,
you're welcome.
In all honesty, my sort of plan, once I finally whether I find out if I pass the bar or not, and stuff like that, is to try to help use the legislation as a means to be able to sort of have my own little legal co-op, in the sense of like a legal co-op in the sense of its actual structure, but also a legal co-op in the sense that it would be an assistance to co-ops that want to start, using the legislation as a sort of springboard that says, hey, if you like the legislation and you think you want to do this, then we can help you out legally, and for obviously for like nothing. And the idea would be doing that for pro bono. And then to me, that's what's really important. Like if I can do that, that's what's really important about getting the co-op center at the public university, because in DC there's only one public university, the University of the District of Columbia. It's old. It's like, I think it's majority Black, and it's got a lot of historical community roots. And so if you can connect all of that, there's a whole racial dynamic in DC about economically in terms of development, gentrification, and also loss of employment. So the idea being you can connect with a historically community-based and community-connected university with a law firm who's willing to do it for nothing. You're going to be able to get a lot of interest that you can translate immediately into action. So the idea, that's sort of the long-term vision in my plan, at least for me, is being able to position myself so that I can connect the different things that need to be connected without costing people an arm and a leg, which is sometimes one of the cost prohibitions of starting something like a co-op. I mean, I have ideas for different co-ops I think we could do if we were able to get some of the incentives that are included in the bill and stuff. So it's a way that, could I get the experience of working on the bill, then actually helping the co-ops start, and then actually do my own. So I think to me, the whole democracy at work thing in general is my long-term plan. I've been involved in a lot of socialist organizations and stuff for a while, but this is the one that can actually, like I said, have those tangible material benefits that, you can or cannot do, or if you want or don't want, use the scary S word, and it doesn't matter, because the question is not what do you call it, but what are you doing?
Right, exactly. And another thing that people don't realize is that ESOPs, even though they're not like our panacea per se, they're closer to that than what we have, the current corporate structure. And it's in the Republican platform. And we've got Ronald Reagan on video talking about the next step in the economy is full worker ownership of business.
I've long believed that one of the mainsprings of our own liberty has been the widespread ownership of property among our people, and the expectation that anyone's child, even from the humblest of families, could grow up to own a business or a corporation. Thomas Jefferson dreamed of a land of small farmers, of shop owners and merchants. Abraham Lincoln signed into law the Homestead Act that ensured that the great western prairies of America would be the realm of independent, property-owning citizens. A mightier guarantee of freedom is difficult to imagine. I know we have with us today employee owners from La Perla Plantation in Guatemala. They have a stake in the place where they work and a stake in the freedom of their country. When communist guerrillas came, these proud owners protected what belonged to them. They drove the communists off their land, and I know you join me in saluting their courage. Well, in the marketplace, our people benefit from direct and indirect business ownership. There are currently close to 10 million self-employed workers in the United States. That's nearly 9% of total civilian employment. And millions more hope to own a business someday. Furthermore, over 47 million individuals reap the rewards of free enterprise through stock ownership in the vast number of companies listed on the U.S. stock exchanges. I can't help but believe that in the future we'll see in the United States and throughout the Western world an increasing trend toward the next logical step, employee ownership. It's a path that benefits a free people.
But we got way more in common than we think,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Perfect.
In order to add more to Kevin, which I highly recommend, I congratulate you for graduating. We do need more progressive attorneys and law practitioners. We did have a long online discussion yesterday with the union co-op movement, part of the U.S. Federation of Co-ops, and which we're also working with too. If you go to our website at democracyatworksandiego.org, you'll see the list of all the co-op organizations we support. But anyway, Ellen Brown, who's a very famous attorney who's promoting public banking, yesterday. And so what's happening is several very interesting and wonderful things are happening. Number one, back to what we were talking about, financing and all this stuff, they're also doing it, they're on parallel tracks, want to do the same thing. They want to start getting, setting up co-op banks to fund. That's going to be kind of the core or the bedrock, because you need capital. And of course, we have a motto in our group called, our job is to take capital away from capitalists.
Yeah.
And the way to do it is to do the hard work of institution building. That's why when we first started this movement, we were in a kind of social movement phase. Now we're transforming into what's called institutional development phase.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting because now we're addressing really practical institutional issues, legal issues. For example, in law, one of the things we addressed was we need more attorneys who specialize in co-op enterprise business law formation, tax law that addresses the issue of how to streamline and make more efficient the funding and also the entity tax setup for co-ops to get special legislation for tax breaks and so forth. And then, of course, the third leg of this was, of course, ongoing public education. So we were trying to keep it a very practical solutions because a lot of the people I've talked to, and by the way, I'm also a political science professor. I teach at our local community college. One of the things we were talking about is actually having a national co-op community college educational policy setup. We actually go to community colleges, which a lot of them are like trade schools, where we go over there and say, okay, you're learning a trade, but when you get out, instead of being an employee, here, we'll help you teach you how to form a co-op enterprise and get you up and running instead of you just go out and being an exploitable employee. Yeah. So we talked a lot about that, and that's gaining a lot of traction. I think Cooney in New York, there's a professor there who's working on that project. We talked to him yesterday. So that's part of this whole new alternative institution building. So as far as the Trump phenomenon, what I tell my students is I essentially ignore him.
Yeah, me too.
Because what happens is people get very emotional, and it's a form of distraction and misdirection.
Yes.
Yep. Left, and like you were saying, Mary made a good point. The left has got to form a major coalition, and we had a lot of discussion about that too. Especially the Democratic Socialists of America are doing coalition building here in Southern California with a lot of groups.
Yeah, they're very active here too.
Yeah, likewise in Chicago, we have a member as part of our group.
Yeah, we have every time we have at least one member from DSA who comes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that is from the political movement point of view, to build political institutions on the left, because as far as we're concerned, the corporate Democrats and the Republicans, what we call the Demo-Republican Party duopoly. From my informed opinion, I was teaching politics for 27 years, I think they're in massive institutional crisis of legitimacy. Mm-hmm. And that is an opportune moment for us here. What we're doing, that's why we're becoming kind of famous right now, because we're offering the economic foundation, practical foundation to do something, and showing people, yes, the left can form a policy. So it's really exciting right now. A lot of people are starting to come on board with these ideas. And then the other thing, from a public policy point of view, we did a 3 comparison with Corbyn's Labor Party platform. He has a manifesto, Bernie Sanders' platform, and Jill Stein. And we did an actual running comparison. And those 3 right there, if integrated, would be really good, substantial policy platforms that cover a whole range of issues: environment, economics, politics, foreign policy, domestic policy. So we have all the parts, moving parts there. We just got to build, if you will, the movement into a new institution. And that's, of course, the hard work. But we're doing good, though. I mean, happily to say it's exciting. A lot of people are interested.
It's mostly progress, which
Yeah.
you know, which is, you'd think that in the sort of era of Trump that it would be all defense and all sort of just trying to push back a tide, but it really isn't that. I mean, the tide is just not really in their favor. So while it is a distraction, nothing's getting done, and so that actually gives us space to get something done, and something that, like Mario, you were saying too, that does in principle have widespread political support. It just doesn't have widespread awareness. It's not something that people's lenses are being pointed to. So while there's all these kinds of distractions, if there's something being done, if there's some legislation that's going up, or there's this new rising institution in terms of a new economic structure that people just haven't been aware of, but that is possible, that gives people hope in an otherwise very hopeless situation. You constantly hear people saying that everything is screwed up. So if we can give something that if we can be the thing that is saying everything isn't screwed up, we have the fix. We just need you to come and help us and be part of this larger institution and build these connections and interactions, and could be a potential base for building, like, outside of just economic things, but building political power, which will be necessary for the real kinds of fundamental changes that would need to take place to maintain a longer sort of majorly altered economic system, which is the ultimate goal. So yeah.
You know, to piggyback on that, I'm sorry, that's something, it was brought up earlier about having more numbers at individual groups. And we talk about that at Chicago as well. However, the last meeting we had discussed, and Mary, you kind of alluded to this earlier. You don't really want to worry about numbers just yet. We're all relatively, well, at least with Chicago, we say we're all relatively new to this as an organization. And just the points were just made, you need to kind of, bottom line, it's show me something.
Yeah.
If you want me to come out, you have to show me what am I coming out for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one thing, as we talked about these projects that we're trying to get off the ground, our focus is, well, let's get them off the ground, because once we have something, that's when we can actually go out and say, okay, you know what? I need you for this. Then that's when I need the foot soldiers for this. This is when we need to get out in the mobilization of people. It's hard to just have, people come in and out of meetings inconsistently if there's no game plan and no plan of action.
Yeah.
So again, I'll reiterate, not worrying so much about the numbers, but like you said, the dedication to these plans of action.
Right. Absolutely.
Very good point. Very good.
Anger can organize a lot of people, but it's not going to sustain them for very long.
Correct.
Whereas something that doesn't take a lot of people to create can grow a lot of people and sustain it for much longer.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. I apologize for interrupting. I think someone else was trying to say, but we have been dealing with this issue where people come out, but they don't know what to do with their time. So that's why the idea of the legislation hit me personally, because I feel like we were meeting in New York and we were talking about how bad capitalism is, but there wasn't anything after that discussion. So what do we do after we decide that the system isn't working anymore? How do we change it? Because, so you change it by doing really boring stuff like lobbying your legislator or like running for office or something like that. Because if you want to change the rules, you have to make the rules, or you have to get somebody to change them for you.
Exactly. Very good point. You've just addressed something that's kind of the core of political and social science, and aside from all the jargon, it's called institution building. What you're really doing, you're essentially changing the entire social, economic, and political order. And we found out when it happens with social movements, people, there are different categories of people we found out. The core group we call the most committed people. Okay, they're always there. They're educated. They know where they're going. They're looking for practical objectives. And kind of like a bullseye, they're the core. The next layer, okay, it would be people who are very interested, but they're still learning. And then you have the third layer, periphery, it's kind of what we call political hobbyists. This is exciting, it's interesting, but they kind of come and go. All right, so the idea is to form the core, a practical institutional core, like a magnet starts drawing people in, because as the other gentleman in Chicago was saying, you have to, as we say, put your money where your mouth is. Okay, you've got to prove something. And that's what we're trying to do, is focus only on practical enterprise development. That's why we have these meetings. And we actually have RCO2 Tires is very famous in LA. They make, I think their first year they made over $1 million. They recycle rubber. They're kind of a reclamation company. And it was just a bunch of guys that got together and said, we're going to form this as a worker-owner co-op. So they actually proved, they have the, the P&L statement, as I say, to prove here's what we're doing. And that's what the public wants to see. Okay, you can show them that, then they'll feel more confident. And then you kind of refine that over time. This is where the educational part comes in. We talked about before, setting up essentially a how-to manual, or how to create worker-directed enterprises for dummies, so to speak. Here's how you do it. And this is where you guys who are attorneys or CPAs, practitioners, come in, where you can actually start practicing in that area. And the third one, back to education, is the Union Co-op Association actually is working with graduate business schools now to create essentially co-op MBAs to shift them away from the
corporate structures, yeah.
Right, to create managers who will help start and be manager worker owners in enterprises, and then manage them accordingly with their internal governing structure. And of course, that's going to be a huge change for traditional business schools, because they're all the hierarchical capitalist ideology, how you run an enterprise. Okay, and that's something we talked about yesterday. I think City University of New York is already in the planning stages for creating that. I kind of humorously call it the Red MBA.
Awesome.
Communist MBA, here we come.
Yeah.
And ironically, it's all doable, because you have the Mondragon exam. But the thing is that you're really creating the environment to start taking capital away from capitalist enterprises and we're forming a whole new microeconomy within the larger capitalist national economy. Okay, that's really what's happening right now, and that's what's exciting. And we've already proven that co-op enterprises are extremely stable, economically stable institutions.
I was going to say, if it's about competition, let's compete, because I bet we could win.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that if you could just get a level playing field, or at least an entrance, an ability to enter into it so that you could compete, which it's essentially taking capital away from capitalists without necessitating, not right away at least, or maybe not, it doesn't necessitate the removal of capital from capitalists by state power, but you could do it by the competition, by actually beating them at their own game.
Exactly. Well, again, that's a fair way of looking at it. And don't forget, I tell my students and the people we work with, we're still in a capitalist economic environment. So we are going to be in a market system. We're going to still be competing, but our internal governing structures will be more solid.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's really important.
Yeah. Once workers understand that they could work for a firm, that they will have economic workplace democracy, you will have people fleeing Uber and whatever the sharing economy, and people like myself. I worked as a 1099 freelancer for my whole career. No benefits ever, no job security, no nothing guaranteed. There's no reason why people want to work like that. They don't have the opportunity to work in a different way.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, Tamir and Kayla,
yeah.
how's that going?
How are you doing?
Hello.
Introduce yourselves to the group.
Yeah, let me.
Let them get kind of situated there.
Oh, sorry, Caleb. You were on mute for some reason. How you doing? Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So my name is Temur, and I've just recently moved to Atlanta. So I'm based out of Atlanta region right now. But I've been following the democracy at work for a long time now.
Oh, cool.
Well, welcome.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I'm kind of passionate about this domain.
Well, we need that. We need that committed passion for this.
I think both intellectually and also professionally somehow. I think
Of
that's
course, yeah, it's
Both.
a good point.
Hey, who else came? Caleb, can you hear me?
If he's trying to say something, looks like we're having some trouble receiving it.
Got it. You might need to unmute yourself because you're unmuted on our side, Caleb.
He's got no mic.
He's got no, but he can hear us.
He
Okay,
can hear
cool.
us.
Well, that's Caleb from Seattle. They just started doing their groups, and I think this is their third meeting so far, so they're officially going up on the website now. So that's pretty cool.
Excellent. Bravo.
Welcome,
And,
welcome.
Thanks, Atlanta, for joining us.
thank you.
So,
Mary,
yeah, go ahead.
I just had a question. Just what George has been talking about from an education standpoint. So, with regards to either the Democratized Enterprise website or Democracy at Work's website, has there been some discussion about having like an education section? So, specifically to talk about the philosophy of the different types of worker cooperatives, maybe some sample language on, well, not sample language, but just general ideas of what that entails, what that might mean for transitioning into a business into a worker cooperative. Also, in terms of maybe like George is alluding to, how you can start initiatives maybe in local and statewide institutions about putting worker cooperative language and curricula into the education programs of whether it's at the city, county, or state level.
Yeah, that's a big question. I think that there is the institute.coop. Are you guys familiar with that? It's the Democracy at Work Institute. And they are a totally different entity than we are, but they do more of the co-op conversions and that type of thing. So I believe that the democracyatwork.info is the 501c3, so it's educational in nature, and it basically just talks about macroeconomics, not necessarily the teeny tiny little details of how to legally change into a co-op and all that. So we usually refer people to institute.coop for
Institute.coop.
yeah,
Okay.
institute.coop, which is Democracy at Work Institute. And people, Betsy tells me that people can frequently get them mixed up, but they're two different entities.
Right. I might recommend for those all online and listening, if you go to, we have a really simple website we just set up. We're going to be expanding it later, but at democracyatworksandiego.org, we have several buttons. One is called Educate, Engage, Educate, Activate. And then we have events. If you look under Educate, what I started doing is just doing a long compilation of all the possible co-op organizations and federations that have specific information. So you might want to go, that's a starting, and you can adapt and adopt that for your own educational purposes. And then we're going to be doing both education and actual working with co-op development. That's kind of what our task is here, back to the more practical application of it. And we want to have more, eventually have more seminars. This is going to be our first one in August, where we're going to have kind of how-to workshop. Here's how you do it. Okay, you go through and form the business entity. You, within your specific state, like in California, you form, generally it's an LLC is usually the most amendable type of business entity. You can have multi-members automatically, and then you can customize co-ops, which is really interesting. It's not just one flavor. There's a whole variety. It's a very flexible enterprise. But of course, the core value is the democratic value of the relationship of everybody within the enterprise.
Cool. George, before I forget to ask you, if you feel comfortable, do you mind connecting me with Ellen Brown as well? Because I had reached out to her for the Public Banking Institute, but she hasn't got back to me because she probably doesn't know who I am.
Okay, yeah. Well,
she doesn't know me from Adam.
Also, right. We want to do, again, we're doing a lot of mutual promotion, especially with our own Democracy at Work group, but also with others. So we're going to be in contact with you because we want to do a lot of online streaming, actually, eventually. That's continuous.
Yeah.
And we're even going to go out and take a camera out to the street and do kind of what we call short documentaries.
Okay.
Where we see people that are unemployed or that are in an employee work relationship, start questioning people, and essentially go out in the San Diego area with a camera and start talking to people, interviewing them, and then we'd like to promote this as an ongoing series, so to speak, and then we include your take on it. And on our interviews at Pasadena Media, we will have segments on Democracy at Work, what you're doing there, because we're doing what we call continual mutual promotion as much as possible, because we have the power of broadcast.
Right.
And don't forget that power of broadcast. If you have access to a studio or anybody, that's the most powerful thing you have. To keep doing broadcast production, because we're competing against the corporate press and all these other interests, which have the blowhorn, so to speak, and they're always out there. So we're, as alternative media, trying to get a broader broadcast audience.
Got it.
And
where do you recommend broadcasting?
Well, right now, I have to actually drive. It's almost 2 hours one way to go to LA. I go to Pasadena, where the studios. We're trying to develop one here in San Diego, and our idea is to get eventually a total Southern California broadcast coverage.
I mean, television, radio, YouTube. What?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're doing radio, like over-air radio.
Yeah, radio, cable. Mostly our focus is going to be on streaming online media.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at the studio, they actually have a control room. We can actually do a simulcast in a live broadcast through YouTube.
Okay.
So the hard part of this is, for those who are not, I'm learning, by the way, because it's really exciting for me, but if you haven't been in the broadcast or media business, you have to learn how to set up schedules into the next year, for example. And then, of course, you have to do the script writing. There's a lot of preparation work. But once you get it under your belt, it becomes more formulaic. It's more boilerplate. You can start putting in your content and then start streaming and recording it and getting out there. But you have to do it on a 7/24, 365 basis is our eventual goal. Right now, we're just kind of doing it once a month, but we want to do it more than that. And then we're reaching out to local radio stations, local activists, media groups. And also we're trying to get a lot of people who want to volunteer do internship who are in mass communications, journalism, graphic arts, who do social media development. And we've had a lot of interest in people like that. But again, they need to be organized into a certain co-op arrangement, and they can put their work and their skills to very practical use.
Very cool. All right. Well, it sounds awesome. What everybody's doing, and it's almost an hour here. So I wanted to ask any last words or any last updates that you guys want to chime in before we go.
No, not on my end.
I'm blanking on the exact name of it, but we do have a contact who's come to, or a member basically who's come to several meetings, like the last 3 or 4 meetings, who his wife is like the program manager at a local radio station. I guess it's a progressive radio station. It's terrible. I don't listen to radio because I don't have a car and I don't use the radio. So so I don't know enough about the local radio.
believe it or not, radio, a lot of people still listen to radio.
And I totally, I totally believe that. Like, cause I mean, yeah, everybody else in the democracy work group knows about it. I'm like the outlier in the sense of like the guy who doesn't know. So I'm totally, I think it's a great idea. And one of our members asked if we'd be able to get economic update at least as a show on that station, because if you look at the coverage that economic update has, there's like a hole around Washington D.C. So we're trying to fill it, because at least if we could get that, then we get the toehold in, and then potentially, like what you were saying, it would be really great to have a little program, even if it's, you know, every other Sunday for an hour, you know, whatever, that's fine, you know, and we could just talk and give update about what's happening with the legislation, and because we have that sort of three-prong approach too, where it's education, advocacy, and then outreach. So the idea is make a network, promote the idea of it, and then work on the legislation. So right now the legislation is the focus to help the other two, but one of them, in terms of the outreach, the helpful thing would be getting on the radio to talk about it. So we're trying to do that too. The guy who has those connections can sometimes be hard to nail down. So that's it's one of those things in the institution building of the core. He's sort of part of the core, but a slightly transient one. So we've got to nail him down.
I know what you mean, man.
That's possible.
I know what you mean. Just a little thing about the legislation. If you made changes to it and you have any questions, you know, you can always reach out to Chris Michael.
All right. Yeah.
He's
Yeah. I mean, like. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's actually really, like, you can, if you want to pass it along to him, right? I mean, I guess I can tell him, but it's a great idea. It's a great framework. It's totally malleable. It totally works for everything that there's the plan for. So it's a fantastic starting point. If anyone is starting a democracy work where one hasn't been started, like a local place, that's a fantastic thing to start from. Look, we already have this. We already have something, you know. So I think it's really great, and it's helped motivate me, you know, to like, yes, I know what I can do with this. So like, it's really great.
Right. Thank you for bringing up that point. So if anybody is here and still on the call that is relatively new or just started a meeting or wants to start backup meeting, if your group is feasible, you now can go to democratizetheenterprise.org and try to rally your people around lobbying for this worker ownership legislation. So I'll write the link to the website down here in the chat thing, and you guys can check it out if you need some help figuring out what to do when you meet. But I appreciate everybody for being on the call tonight. And do you guys have anything else you want to add before we go?
I like this platform. I like being able to see people.
Me too.
And it works for me. So I you know, if everybody, I mean, does it work with a phone? Can you use your camera on your phone too?
Yeah, I think you can turn on the camera because there's an app. So Zoom has an app. So I think if you download the app, you can use the camera on your phone if you can't call in on a landline or whatever. But it gives you the opportunity to do your video web camera on your computer or your phone or call in from a landline. So it's democratizetheenterprise.org. Enter. Here you go. If you guys can see that in the chat, you can click the link, and there is a state model bill that is basically blank for any state. So you guys can start trying to find legislators in your state houses that will pick this up.
Okay, good.
Cool. All right, well,
also,
thank you.
I'd like to recommend if anybody uses Google Hangouts, they're more than welcome to hang out with us here in San Diego and continue any local or long distance or remote planning sessions and discussions, because these are really helpful. Because we have to obviously get to know each other, get familiar. So again, you're more than welcome to connect with me if anybody wants to. You can send an invite or an email notice, and I can connect with you folks.
Yeah,
conversation.
I would be happy to be on that email list. But George, are you on Facebook?
Yeah, we have a Democracy at Work San Diego working group on Facebook.
Well, could
And
you,
it's
do
on our
you,
website link.
are you in the group's chat of Democracy at Work?
Yes.
So, you know, that's probably the quickest way to reach people is if you put the link to whatever Google Hangout you're doing, like maybe 30 minutes in advance, people would be able to
Okay.
see that and then get right on there.
Yeah,
Okay,
do
that's
that
fine. All
for
right.
sure. That would
Cool.
be great.
All right. Thank you very much, guys, and I appreciate you joining us. And if you haven't sent me your monthly, remember everybody to please send me your group meeting details 10 days in advance, so I can post it on our website and send out the email for you guys.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great night.
All right. Bye-bye.
George, I'll see you next week. I'm going to go up to your meeting.
Yeah, okay, just keep in touch and give me an email shout out.
Okay.
Take it easy.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.